In this chapter, we will use Photoshop to create the textures and mix maps for our amulet's gold-painted and dirt-layered gemstone using a variety of painting and alpha mask techniques. So before we go to Keyshot, there's actually one more chapter that I figured we might as well do, and that's going to be for us to create the texture for the gem that we have here, so that once we're in Keyshot, we can just plug and play. So what I want you to see here is you can see this kind of hand-painted gold Mount Fuji thing with this torii gate that's in front of here, and then you can also see this kind of rust or dirt that's built up around the edge of this. So by hand, we're going to create the textures for this, and then we're going to go to my ArtStation page and get some of the images for this section. So if you guys remember ArtStation, then just find Seth Thompson. Depending whenever you're watching this tutorial, the amulet might be over here, might be somewhere else, but just click this amulet. And then what I want you guys to do is go down through here and see this image, just right click, save image as, and whatever the default names are here, Mount Fuji, color, etc. I think are fine to keep. Save that. Save image as, save this one. Whatever the default names that are in here are good. Then go way down to the bottom. And then all of these different masks as well, I want you to save those off. So save those off. There should be 4 of them. This one, there's this one that's just like the paint chip one, and then these scratches. The scratches we're not going to use till later in Keyshot, but you might as well download them now. And then the paint chips we can use very soon to help us get some of this kind of material breakup that you're seeing here in Photoshop. Now, for those of you that downloaded the tutorial and purchased it, there is a Psd file that I've saved for you that actually has some bonus stuff in it. So if you come into the image texture map section and then just pick up this one, painted gold Mount Fuji, open that up. And in a few minutes here, I'll show you guys a whole breakdown of this. Before we do that though, there's a couple things that I want to show you. One is some of the reference that I was using when I was looking at this. So when I was getting inspired to create this, you can see, as I mentioned before, some of the different bracelets and materials that I found. So in Japan and China, there's a lot of this almost like gold leafing that's painted on top of different stones or materials. I really wanted to kind of duplicate that within my image. Here you can see an early test that I did. Didn't turn out that great, but you get the basic idea. And then over here, I really like the idea of kind of like this rounded gem. That's why I went with the rounded gem here. And then also too, I originally wanted to have some type of interesting gate or things like this. So this is what's called a torii gate from Japan. So I use this kind of as reference to create the image you see here. And then here you can see my original concept sketch. Just super simple, done on pencil. I knew I didn't need to spend much time on it, but it's there. So give me a second here. All right. So what we want to do now is let's go back to ZBrush, to our latest file that we have. And we want to unhide our amulet again, or sorry, our gem. And we need to get the UVs for this and make a UV template. So if you remember, we did this previously, but let's do it again. We're going to drag the Z plugin over here, UV master. And if you remember correctly, I'm going to press Shift F. We already made the UVs for this previously. We separated these two poly groups and then made that. So you should have UVs on this already. I'm just going to turn off symmetry and then just hit, well, I guess I can keep that on. Let's hit flatten. And here's the UVs that we have for this piece. I think maybe previously we had it centered, but for some reason it keeps kind of defaulting back to this side. So let's just keep it like this, and I know it won't shift around on us again. I'm going to kind of zoom in and maximize the space on this a bit. Remember the back of the gem we're not going to see, that's why the UVs are so small here. And this one we want to have as much UV space as possible. So on my keyboard I'm going to press Alt and then print screen. Print screen's a button on the top right of your keyboard. Or at least on Windows it is. I don't know what it'd be on Mac. So now we have a screenshot of that. And let's go back to Photoshop, File, New, Create, Control V to paste that in here. I'm going to attach this off. I don't like how things snap in there. I should just change my default setting. I just haven't done it yet. And we need to crop this. So let's press M on the keyboard to get our marquee selection. Kind of just eyeball it, get as close as you can to the corner there. Let's zoom out a bit. Select Transform Selection. Come down here, get as close as you can. Press Enter Let's zoom in so that we can get it more accurate. Select, transform selection. And I think we're in pretty good shape here. So let's crop this image, crop. I'm going to zoom out. So now we have a fairly squared image. And I'm going to change the size here under image size. Let's go to 2048 by 2048. We will have it at 2K. Okay. So now we have our nice UV template for our file. I'm going to maximize this a little bit so we can see it easier for the tutorial as I'm doing this. Let's call this one wireframe. The background color, I'm just going to change to black. I'm pressing Control I on my keyboard to invert between that. Control I allows you to invert quickly. That way if we hide this, it's just black in the background. So for those of you that downloaded the files from ArtStation, those Fuji Color and Fuji Alpha, I want you to open those up. And we're going to combine those into one image. So let's hide some of this other stuff so it's not in the way. On the color one first, actually let's go to the gray one. I'm going to do Control A on the keyboard to select all, Control C to copy, come over here to color, Control V, let's paste that in here. Let's duplicate this background layer. And this top layer, we'll just keep it there and let's call it alpha. This bottom one we can call color. And let's select both of these and then hit the folder button. And we'll just call this Fuji. Now let's just keep it like that for the moment. We can close this other one down. And now what we want to do is we want to drag this over into our scene. So we'll select this folder. We're going to press V on our keyboard so that we get to the move tool. And then we'll just take that and then drag it right over here into this other window. Sorry, let's do that again. Drag over here and let go. Oh, it's actually in there. It's just below my wireframe. So let's delete one of those. Pull this to the top here. I'm going to expand that. I'm going to actually move the color on top because I want to visually see that. And then we're just going to kind of eyeball this to get this placed onto the UVs in a nice centered location. So I'm going to select the root of the folder. Let's change the opacity down so we can see what's underneath it. I'm going to press Control T on my keyboard so that we can change that entire group. And actually the size is pretty good. I think it's still a little bit too big, so let's scale that down. One thing is if you're doing this, it's going to non-uniform scale weird, so hold down Shift on your keyboard. And that allows you to do a uniform scale. And just kind of eyeball it. I think something like this feels pretty good. Maybe a little bit more over here to the left. And press Enter to commit that. And let's turn the opacity back up. And I'm going to hide this wireframe underneath. And let's just quickly save this. Let's call it File, Save As. And Psd Seth, that sounds like a good place. Let's call this Gem Texture. And by the way, for those of you that bought the tutorial, if you go to your Painted Gold Mount Fuji layer, you'll notice here underneath the tutorial folder, I have the exact same thing that's set up from that downloaded images from ArtStation. So you could just literally grab this folder and then drag it into your other image, and it'll do the same thing that we just did a second ago. I'm going to hide that. One thing I'm noticing, and sorry about this, I think I left like a little bit of weird thing on the side of the image. Make sure you get rid of that. I'm just going to Control cut that out of there. In the end, it's probably not that important, but I'm going to do it anyways. And it looks like the alpha is fine. So one important thing I want to point out is the alpha. It's really important that these match perfectly because later we're going to use this as, or a black and white image map to help cut out and layer this Mount Fuji emblem on top of this other material. Like literally what you're seeing here is we have like this stone material and key shot, and then we have another material which is like an aluminum paint or something like that that I changed the colors on. So I'm going to show you how to make these layered textures and keyshot, and it's important that the edges of those alphas match perfectly with the color map. Okay. So one thing I want to do really quickly before I start hand creating any textures, we've saved this off. Let's save one more image and then test it in ZBrush for placement. Now I know with ZBrush it will automatically flip images left or right. So what I want you to do is take this image, image rotation, flip canvas vertical, sorry, we want to do flip canvas horizontal. Let's save this off. I'm going to go up one layer. It's up to you guys where you want to save it. And I'm going to call this gem Fuji color. And this is just going to be a test, but we'll save the image in there. Let's go back to ZBrush. Let's unflatten our gemstone that we had. And let's unhide the other side of the amulet. I'm going to press Shift F just because I don't really need to see what's going on with the wireframe. And with the gem selected, let's test this out. Let's go to Texture Map, click here, click Import. Let's find that image that we just saved. Here we go, Gem Fuji color. Let's open that, and bam, it fits in here perfectly. Now looking at this is good to do for a test. You can see like some of the paint is going underneath the edge here. And maybe it's expanded a little bit too far here because remember later we're going to have dirt going up around the edges. So I think it's good for us to actually go into Photoshop and decrease the scale of this just a little bit. So let's go back to Photoshop. Once again, I'm going to come here to the Fuji layer and let's turn down the opacity a bit, make sure that we can see the wireframe underneath. And again, let's press Control T on the keyboard. Let's just scale that down a bit. Remember to hold Shift whenever you're scaling this down so that you get it uniform. Maybe just a bit more. I'm going to change that opacity back up. Let's try this again. I'm just going to save over top of this. Let's go back to ZBrush. It won't update automatically, so we just need to click in here. Let's import it again. All right. Now it looks a lot better. You can see that it's sized down a bit. You know, I feel like honestly it's maybe up a little bit high, so I'll probably move it down just a bit more before I'm done with this and then pull it over. But now we actually have this on here, we have it placed, and it's working with the UVs. So that's great. What I want to do right now is I'm going to turn off the texture, and I think we just need to do a little bit of prep before we do our textures while I'm in here seeing some things. Since we have faceting here, that's going to show up in Keyshot layer in the reflections of this gemstone with the highly reflective material. So let's give it some more subdivisions. Right now there's only 8,000 polys. I'm going to do Control D on the keyboard. That's subdivided up to 30. Let's go a little bit higher, Control D again. Now we can't really see any of those polys. I think that's pretty good. But I do notice because of some of the sculpting and different things we did, the size of the gem is just a little too big right now. So let's scale that down. And we can do that exactly with the deformation tool and size. Let's just scale that down a bit. Not too small. There we go. I think something like that is going to work out pretty nicely. All right, so let's go back to Photoshop. Okay, in Photoshop, just so I don't forget, I am going to really quickly move this down just a little bit. Control T. Scale it down just a teensy bit, and then I'm going to vertically move it down a tiny bit. I think that's going to be good. Enter to commit that, and then get rid of the opacity again. So I'm going to minimize this for a minute. I'm going to close this other file that we had here. You guys can save it if you want to. I'm done with it though, so I'm just going to get rid of it. I'm going to go to this this bonus PSD for the purchasable material, and I just want to show you guys a little bit about how I set up this PSD file. So what I'll show you first is here's the original concept that I had underneath. I mean, it's really low res, it's pretty bad, but I'm not worried about that. I just knew that I needed to have basic placement and layout, no need to spend time rendering. And then you'll notice that for this little tutorial folder, everything kind of matches up almost perfectly. So this is really just for layout. So whenever I was working on this, I did go through and work on separate elements first. One thing I worked on was Mount Fuji. And in here, as always, I'm very organized. I had a clouds layer and then a mountain layer. And there wasn't really anything special I was doing in here. I was just using the brush with some of the standard settings. I think maybe I found a brush or two that had some interesting kind of different square shapes that I could go through and paint things. But for the most part, I was just using stuff like this polygonal lasso tool. And I'd figure out like basic shapes that I could do here. And sometimes I would just go through and solid fill this with the gradient tool and then hand paint some things in. But it was very, very rough. The idea was to get a quick graphic read that from something far away like this was going to look okay. Because I knew in the end, I'd get something like this, and once you combine all the dirt, then you have like the paint chips ripping out from underneath, it tends to look okay. So the other thing I want to show you really quickly, I guess let's unhide the gate layer. I'm also going to bring in my reference layers. So you remember the reference images that I had previously. These are just some crops of the um, gold painting that was on the actual gems and different stuff. And I would go through here and I would just kind of color pick different colors that I like. And then I was using those to paint the different gold colors on this piece. So the gate itself, no big secrets here. Let's go ahead and hide Mount Fuji. This one as well, I had lots of different layers. You know, I broke things up, ropes, tiles. I think the tiles I actually had to grab some roof tiles from the internet somewhere from a temple top, put those on there. Everything else is just hand drawn and not drawn very well. Sesu, this is my name in Japanese written in the katakana alphabet. And then down through here, you can just see different layers that I've saved off, such as dirt, where I'm painting dirt in between different sections. Um, Lines are like these little low res looking lines to simulate wood grain. I mean, the graphic read when you see something like this is not good, but again, you know, going back, I wasn't too worried about how it was going to look here because I knew that it was going to end up showing up okay. So yeah, not a whole lot of secrets here. I just want to quickly show you the structure that I had set up for this. So one thing that we do want to do now is going back to our wireframe image, our gem texture PSD. We're going to create some dirt masks in a few minutes that'll go around the edge. But before we do that, I want to create that kind of cracked paint layer that you're seeing through here. So for those of you that downloaded all the images or you bought the tutorial online, just find the one that's called Mask Paint Chips, open that, and then let's just select all that, Control A, copy. We'll come over here, and I'm going to just Control V to paste that in here. And it fits pretty nicely actually. So I'm going to hide that for a second because I don't need to visually see that at the moment. And I'm going to come down here to the alpha. We don't need to put this on the color one actually. So I'm going to hide this, and this is the alpha. Remember, again, we're going to use this to cut between different layers. So what I want you to do now is click this mask button or the alpha button, come here to channels, and under here, alpha mask, highlight this, and then we're going to say Control V. And right now you can see everything is red. If we move this around, it's just like this kind of red selection. I'm going to kind of position this so that it encompasses the entire thing. And then I'm going to deselect this. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to turn off this background. So now you can see, I'm going to press Control D so you can just see what's going on. You can see that we're cutting away from the alpha, and this is like really, really strong right now. But this would help us cut and get all the different things we need later on whenever we're texturing this, just like you're seeing in here. But I think right now it's a little bit too aggressive in our PSD, so we're going to modify it a little bit. And before we modify this, I just want to show you the power of using this alpha section here. So you can unlink this map, or sorry, you click that unlink button, and when you do that, you can move and position that alpha wherever you want. And this is what I call non-destructive workflow, which is really great to use anytime you want to cut away or do things without actually modifying the base image that's in there. But anyways, I think this is a pretty good placement. But right now, I think also too that it's just too strong everywhere and too uniform. So we're going to go in and we're going to actually paint in some areas so that not everything's going to be cut out. So let's go to our brush mode by pressing B. And by default, I have something selected already, which works quite nice. But you guys should have this as a standard brush. Just click on any of these little dots right here. You can use almost anything. Then I'm going to increase the size of this. And then making sure that I have the alpha selection here. I'm going to go through and just start painting some, and think of this almost like erasing, but we're not erasing the top layer. Again, it's non-destructible. I'm just going to show you guys. If you right click this and you say disable layer mask, you can see we have our original solid mesh. Enable layer mask, now we have it back again. So let's just paint some of the areas back in so that it's just not getting cut and destroyed everywhere. I want this to feel aged, but I don't want it to feel ancient. And maybe especially right here where my name is, I'll kind of clear that up a bit because I don't want something to cut through and then you can't see it at all. Okay, I think that's going to work out pretty well. Let's save this PSD again. And then let's save this image, save as, and we're going to call it Jim Fuji Color. This one we're going to call Jim Fuji Alpha. And since this alpha is going to be used to cut away from the color version, we don't even need to use the alpha to cut away on this one. We're just going to keep it as is. We do need to resave this one more time because I think I moved the positioning of it. But later in KeyShot, if I'm correct, I believe we'll just be able to use that alpha image to cut away from this without having to actually affect this. Okay, so now we have everything updated. So final touches that I think we need to do is to prepare this kind of edge dirt weathering that's all around here. So we have Fuji here. Let's just close that a bit. I'm going to make a new layer here, just kind of like a neutral gray background. I'm going to fill that. I'm going to make a new folder. Let's call this one dirt. And let's show that wireframe again. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to paint some dirt all the way around the edges of this. I'm going to use the same brush that I had a few minutes ago. We need to make a layer first. And as you can see here, we have our brush selected. So let's zoom in a bit. And I'm going to click this button to reset to default settings. So we have black. And then I'm just going to start painting here around the edges so that we can get something I think that'll mix nicely for dirt in a minute. I'll probably speed up the video in a second, so I'll just kind of take a moment to get some of this stuff painted in. And then now also, I wanted to get something that felt fairly solid around the edge, and then we just want to make sure that we have a little bit consistency with some extra dirt that is going to be sitting on top of that painted material out here. So let's just get a couple little splotches here and there. I think that should pretty much do it. You know, this helps me visualize a little bit better. Maybe we need to go through and darken up a couple more areas here a bit more so we have a bit more solid transition. And again, this is just going to be a mask later that we're going to use when we're in Keyshot for our layered material. So our layered material, it's going to have dirt, it's going to have painted gold, and then at the very bottom, underneath the dirt and the gold, is going to be like an onyx stone type material, which is probably going to be simulated by using plastic or whatever interesting material that we can find in Keyshot that we can use, like a stone or metal or something like that. Okay, I think that's good enough. Let's make a new layer here. I'm going to put that inside, and then below this, let's fill that with white because we need to make a nice mask for this. So this time we're going to save this and call it dirt mask. I could save it into this mask section. I guess I might as well since we've been saving stuff in here. We'll call this gem dirt mask. I'll probably end up losing that later, but we'll see. So let's test out the positioning for that in ZBrush as well. And oh, really quickly, I'm just going to save off this PSD, gem texture PSD. Let's save that. Coming back to ZBrush, texture map. Remember, if we turn this on, we can see the placement. Let's go ahead and pull in that mix mask, the dirt mask, and see how that looks. Yeah, so as you can tell, it's not out far enough. So what I think we need to do is spend a bit more time bringing up the dirt a little bit closer to the edge, and that's why we want to keep testing these when we do this. So for example, let's go back, and the goal that we want to do here, you can see here we need to get it a little bit further out because otherwise it's just not going to feel correct. So yep, got to go back to the drawing board. So I'm going to come back here and probably once again I'm going to speed up the video as I'm working on this. All right, and by the way, if you guys ever end up having this happen to your keyboard, that's probably because you pressed R on your keyboard. R activates rotate canvas. So if you hold down R and then you go like this on your keyboard, you can rotate this anywhere, which is pretty handy technique. And then you can hold down Shift to kind of lock it to different angles. So that's what I accidentally did. But anyways, time for me to speed up the video and paint some more stuff in here. All right, let's try this again. All right, great. I think this is going to work perfectly. By the way, one thing I didn't even think about is if you wanted to, an alternate way to make sure that you would have got the great positioning on this is let's turn off the texture. If we would have gone through here and we would have masked this out, so I'm going to turn on transparency on the back here. Like literally what we could have done is something like this. Mask here. Oh, I have perspective on. Let's turn that off. And you can see here, like we would have like a really nice definition of what we needed. If we would have taken something like this and underneath masking, I would have said create alpha over here. You could export that and then you can pull that alpha right into our ZBrush file and use that black and white mask in order to have the really nice positioning on there. That would have saved me some time. So that's something I recommend you use. But anyways, I think we're in good shape now. We have all of the maps that we're going to need from our gem in order to create this nice look that we have here. I think that's all we're going to need. Yeah, I think we can actually go to Keyshot now. So, yep, that's our next steps. I'll show you some of the basics in Keyshot, and then we'll actually get into some material building. Thanks for your patience, and hope you picked up a couple things here with the texture preparation. This tutorial and its downloadable content is available now on my QBrush, Gumroad, and Steam stores, which are linked in the description below. Watch the following video to see what is included with your purchase. If you purchase this tutorial, here is a preview of all the bonus content you will receive. Firstly, in ZBrush, I've included 3 different versions of the amulet. 1, my final sculpted version with all the ornamentational details and destruction. 2, just the sculptural details like ornamentation. 3, a version without anything so you could follow along and create your own during the process. Secondly, you will receive the final Keyshot file demonstrated here, which contains all of the texture maps, lighting, and everything that is shown during the tutorial. The thing that I find really useful about this is having access to the material graph and seeing the complex custom materials that are created during the tutorial. This will really help you with understanding how to create your own complex materials in Keyshot. Next, you will receive all of the final Psd files showcased throughout the tutorial, including this gold-painted Mount Fuji design with all of my different layering processes, as well as the custom crest base that is used later for sculpting in ZBrush based off of masks. Also, you'll get all of the final texture maps that are showcased during the tutorial, such as these, which are all tileable. You will also receive all of the original videos in downloaded format at their full high definition resolution. Also, I have included dozens of high quality personal art images such as my Dark Souls 3 High Lord of Walnor fan art, which inspired me to create the Amulet tutorial to showcase the techniques I learned and developed during the process. Whether you purchase this tutorial or follow along for free on Facebook or YouTube, thank you for your continued support, and I cannot wait to see the epic amulets you create soon.